I baked my late wife's recipe for my son's birthday as promised. My daughter-in-law threw it in the trash and spat, "This isn't your house anymore." When I asked her why she hated me so much, she snapped, "Because he still loves you more than me." Hours later, she found her name removed from something that left her screaming into the night. I stood in what used to be my kitchen, watching my late wife's birthday cake slide down the inside of the trash can, orange frosting smearing against crumpled paper towels and coffee grounds. The scent of cinnamon and citrus that had filled the room moments before now mixed with garbage, and I felt something crack inside my chest that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with rage I didn't know I still had in me. Alina stood there wiping her hands on a dish towel like she'd just touched something diseased, her perfectly manicured nails catching the afternoon light streaming through the window Lydia, and I had installed 30 years ago when Daniel was just a baby. My hands were shaking, flour still dusting my knuckles from 2 hours of careful mixing and folding, following Lydia's handwritten recipe card that I kept in a plastic sleeve because the paper had grown soft from use and tears and time. "Why would you do that?" My voice came out strangled, barely recognizable as my own. Alina tossed the towel onto the counter with theatrical disgust. "Because this isn't your house anymore, Harold. The sooner you accept that, the better for everyone." I am Harold Whitmore, 72 years old, and I have always been too proud for my own good. Lydia used to tell me that my stubbornness was both my greatest strength and my most dangerous weakness, that I held onto things too tightly and let them go too completely, that there was no middle ground in my heart. She was right. When I love with everything, and when I'm done, I'm completely done. No second chances, no room for forgiveness, just a door slamming shut so hard the walls shake. After Lydia died 2 years ago from cancer that ate through her body faster than any of us could process, I clung to her traditions like they were life rafts in an ocean I didn't know how to swim in anymore. The birthday cake was sacred. Every year since Daniel was born 38 years ago, Lydia baked this same recipe, her grandmother's secret combination of orange zest, cinnamon, vanilla, and something else she never wrote down, some magical ingredient that existed only in her hands and her instinct. I had watched her make it dozens of times, and after she died I taught myself, spending months getting it wrong, cakes too dry or too sweet, or somehow lacking that indefinable quality that made it Lydia's. But I had promised her with her hand in mine in that terrible hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and death, promised I would keep this one tradition alive, that Daniel would have his mother's cake every birthday for the rest of his life. And Alina had just thrown it in the trash like it was nothing. "Why do you hate me so much?" The question came out before I could stop it, raw and pathetic, and I hated myself for asking, for showing weakness, for caring what this woman thought of me. Something flickered across Alina's face, something ugly and true. Her jaw tightened, her eyes narrowed, and for just a second I saw past the careful makeup and the designer clothes and the practiced smile she wore for the world. "You want to know why?" Her voice dropped to something venomous. "Because he still loves you more than me. Because no matter what I do, no matter how perfect I am, no matter how much I give him, he still runs to you, still asks what you think. Still measures everything against what Lydia would have wanted. I'm his wife, Harold, me. But I'm never enough because you're still here, still taking up space in his head, still making me compete with a dead woman and a father who won't let go." The words hit me like physical blows, each one landing with precision in places I didn't know were vulnerable. I opened my mouth to respond, to defend myself, to explain that love wasn't a competition, that a son's love for his father didn't diminish what he felt for his wife, but nothing came out. Alina grabbed her purse from the counter, her hands steady even though her voice had been shaking with fury moments before. "Daniel will be home soon for his party. I bought a beautiful cake from that bakery downtown, the expensive one, the one everyone talks about. We'll use that, and you'll smile and pretend everything is fine because that's what you do, isn't it? Pretend everything is fine while you judge me for not being her." She walked out, heels clicking against the hardwood floors that I had refinished myself the summer Lydia got sick, when I needed something to do with my hands besides hold hers and watch her disappear. The front door closed, not quite a slam, but close enough to make the windows rattle. I stood there alone in the kitchen, staring at the trash can, at the ruined cake, at 2 years of grief and effort and love reduced to garbage. Something shifted in me then, something cold and calculating that Lydia would have recognized with alarm. She had seen this side of me before, the side that emerged when I felt betrayed, when my pride was wounded beyond repair. I walked slowly to my study, the room that Daniel and Alina had reluctantly agreed I could keep when I moved into the guest house behind their property 6 months ago after selling the family home became too painful, too full of Lydia's absence. I told myself it was practical, that I could help with yard work and be close to Daniel, that the guest house was charming and independent. But the truth I didn't want to examine too closely, was that I was terrified of being alone, terrified of irrelevance, terrified that without proximity to my son I would simply cease to matter to anyone at all. In my study, I pulled out the leather folder I kept in the bottom drawer of my desk, the one containing all the legal documents I had carefully organized after Lydia's death: estate plans, trust documents, property deeds. And there, paperclipped to the inheritance trust I had established last year, was Alina's name, written in my careful architect's hand on the beneficiary designation forms. Alina Whitmore, daughter-in-law, co-owner of the property, recipient of 40% of the estate assets upon my death, provisions for her security and comfort because Lydia had made me promise, had made me swear that I would take care of Daniel's family, that I would make sure his wife was protected and valued. But Alina had made something very clear today. She didn't want to be part of my family. She wanted me erased. I picked up my pen, the expensive fountain pen Lydia had given me for our 30th anniversary, and I drew a single line through Alina's name, then another, and another, until it was completely obliterated. The scratch of pen on paper sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Daniel arrived 20 minutes later, his key turning in the lock, his voice calling out cheerfully. "Dad, Alina, I'm home." I emerged from the study, forcing my face into something resembling normalcy, my architect's training allowing me to construct a facade that hid the rage still churning in my stomach. Daniel looked tired, his tie loosened, his shirt wrinkled from a long day at the engineering firm where he worked. He had Lydia's eyes, warm and brown and kind, the kind of eyes that made it hard to lie to him. "Hey, Dad." He hugged me, and I held on maybe a second too long, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with coffee and paper. "Where's the cake?" Before I could answer, Alina appeared from upstairs, freshly changed into a cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly social security check, her makeup reapplied, her smile brilliant and cold. "Your father made something earlier, but it didn't quite work out." Her voice was honey-sweet, with just enough sadness underneath to sound convincing. "Kitchen disaster, you know how it goes, but don't worry, I got us something amazing from Dominique's." Daniel's face fell slightly, but Dad always makes Mom's cake. "I know, sweetheart, but maybe it's time for new traditions. Your father isn't getting any younger, and baking can be so difficult." She touched his arm, possessive, marking territory. "Besides, this cake is supposed to be incredible. Raspberry cream with champagne frosting." I watched Daniel's internal struggle, saw him weighing his loyalty to his mother's memory against his desire to avoid conflict with his wife, saw the moment he chose peace over truth. "Yeah, okay, that sounds great." He looked at me apologetically. "Maybe next year, Dad, when you're feeling up to it." I smiled, the expression feeling like it might crack my face. "Of course, son, whatever makes everyone happy." The birthday dinner was excruciating. Alina's expensive cake tasted like sugar and air, beautiful to look at and completely devoid of soul, just like everything else she touched. I ate my slice in silence while Alina dominated the conversation, talking about the vacation she wanted to take to Tuscany, the new car she thought they should lease, the renovations she wanted to make to the main house. My house. The house I had signed over to Daniel 3 years ago when Lydia got sick, when we thought it would simplify things, when I still believed family meant something permanent and unbreakable. Daniel nodded along, occasionally glancing at me with concern that he didn't quite voice, and I wondered when he had become so afraid of his own wife. After they cut the cake and opened presents, after Alina had performed her role as devoted wife with Oscar-worthy precision, I excused myself and walked back to the guest house through the dark yard, following the stone path I had laid myself last summer, each stone placed with the kind of attention to detail that had defined my architectural career. In the privacy of my small kitchen, I baked again. It was past midnight, but sleep felt impossible, and my hands needed something to do besides shake with suppressed fury. I mixed flour and sugar and cinnamon, zested oranges until my knuckles were stained and aching, beat eggs until the whites formed stiff peaks like tiny mountains. The recipe came easier now, muscle memory combining with something deeper, some connection to Lydia that transcended death and grief and time. The cake emerged from the oven golden and perfect, smelling exactly the way it should, the way Lydia's always had. I didn't frost it, didn't plan to eat it, just needed to prove to myself that I still could, that Alina couldn't take this away from me, that some things remained mine even in this strange new life where I was a guest in my own home and a burden in my own family. I wrapped the cake carefully in plastic wrap and put it in the refrigerator, then sat at my small kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the leather folder from my study. The next morning I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my bank, where I had maintained accounts for 47 years and where the manager still called me by name. "Harold, how are you holding up?" Margaret's voice was warm with genuine concern, the kind you can't fake. "I need to make some changes to my accounts. Can I come in this morning?" There was a pause. "Of course, is everything all right?" "Everything is fine, I'm just tidying up some things." The second call was to my attorney, Robert Bradford, a man I had known since he was fresh out of law school, and I had hired him to handle the contracts for a commercial building I designed downtown. He was 60 now, successful and cautious, the kind of lawyer who asked questions. Harold, good to hear from you. What can I do for you? I need to revise my estate documents, specifically the trust and property inheritance arrangements. Another pause, longer this time. That's fairly significant. Can I ask what prompted this? Family circumstances have changed. I'll explain when I see you. Can you fit me in today? For you, always come by at 2. The third call was to the city property office, where I requested copies of all the deeds and title documents for the property where the main house and guest house sat, the 5 acres that had been in the Whitmore family since my parents bought it in 1953, before Daniel was born, before Alina existed, before everything got so complicated. I showered and dressed carefully, choosing the suit Lydia had always said made me look distinguished, the charcoal grey one with the blue tie she had given me for Christmas 3 years ago, the last Christmas we had together. In the mirror I looked older than I remembered, more tired, the lines around my eyes deeper, my hair thinner, but my posture was still straight, my gaze still sharp. I was not irrelevant yet. At the bank, Margaret ushered me into her office with coffee and concern. Talk to me, Harold. I explained calmly and clearly that I wanted to remove Alina Whitmore from all account beneficiary designations, that I wanted to restructure the payable on death provisions, that I wanted everything to flow directly to Daniel with specific language preventing any marital property claims. Margaret's eyebrows rose. This is a significant change. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. She processed the paperwork without further comment, though I could see questions in her eyes that she was too professional to ask. At Robert Bradford's office, the conversation was more challenging. He was a good lawyer, which meant he pushed back. Harold, removing your daughter-in-law from the trust entirely is a drastic step. He had the revised documents I had requested spread across his massive oak desk. It could create significant family conflict. It could potentially be challenged in court, especially if Alina can prove she had reasonable expectations based on prior conversations or documents you shared with her. I leaned forward and I knew my face had gone cold, had taken on that expression Lydia used to call my architect face, the one that meant the design was final and no further changes would be considered. She threw my late wife's birthday cake in the trash and told me I was no longer relevant in my own family. She made it clear that she views me as competition for my son's affection rather than as his father. I don't owe her my estate, Robert. I don't owe her anything. Robert studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but I'm going to build in some protections, some language that makes it clear this was your decision made with full mental capacity and after careful consideration. I don't want Daniel caught in a legal battle after you're gone. Do whatever you need to do legally, just remove her, completely, from everything. The paperwork took 2 hours. Robert was thorough, asking questions, documenting my reasoning, making sure every word would withstand scrutiny. We revised the trust documents so that all assets would remain solely under Daniel's control, with provisions that they were his separate property, not marital property, not subject to division in the event of divorce. We restructured the property deed so that while Daniel owned the main house and land outright, Alina had no ownership interest, no claim, no rights beyond what marriage law automatically granted her. We changed beneficiary designations on life insurance policies, investment accounts, retirement funds. By the time I signed the final document, my hand was cramping and my signature was getting sloppy, but I felt lighter than I had in months, clearer, more myself. When will these changes take effect? I asked. Immediately upon filing, which I'll do tomorrow morning. The bank changes are already active. Within 48 hours, Alina Whitmore will be removed from everything. Robert paused, his pen tapping against his legal pad. Harold, I have to ask, have you considered talking to Daniel about this first? I stood, gathering my copies of the documents, sliding them into the leather folder that now felt heavier with significance. Daniel chose his wife. That's his right, but I don't have to fund her. I don't have to give her my life's work. She wanted me out of the picture. Fine, but she doesn't get to keep the picture frame. That evening I sat in my guest house and waited. Part of me felt guilty, the part that still remembered being young and in love, the part that understood how complicated marriage could be, how insecurity could make people cruel, how Alina probably had her own wounds that made her see me as a threat. But the larger part, the part that was still raw from watching Lydia's cake slide into the trash, that part felt satisfied in a cold, precise way that scared me a little. I had always been this way, Lydia used to say, all or nothing, complete devotion or complete dismissal. No middle ground, no second chances. It was the flaw that had cost me friendships, business relationships, family connections over the years. But it was also the strength that had allowed me to build a successful career, to love Lydia with absolute fidelity for 43 years, to be the kind of father who showed up, who kept promises, who baked birthday cakes even when it hurt. My phone buzzed, a text from Daniel asking if I wanted to come over for dinner tomorrow night. Alina's idea, an olive branch maybe, or maybe just appearances. I texted back a polite acceptance, then turned off my phone and poured myself 2 fingers of the whiskey Lydia used to say I saved for emotional emergencies. The bottle was dusty, barely touched since her funeral. I sat in the dark, sipping slowly, and thought about revenge. Lydia would have told me this was wrong. She would have advocated for conversation, for family therapy, for trying harder to understand Alana's perspective. She would have been disappointed in me for being so cold, so final, so unwilling to bend. But Lydia wasn't here anymore, and I was tired of bending. The next day passed in strange, suspended tension, like waiting for a storm you can see building on the horizon. I worked in my garden, pulling weeds with more aggression than necessary, my knees aching from kneeling on the hard ground. The tomatoes I had planted in spring were heavy with fruit now, and I picked them carefully, thinking about how Lydia used to make sauce from them every August, filling the house with the scent of basil and garlic in summer. I delivered a basket of tomatoes to the main house, leaving them on the porch with a note that simply said, "From the garden." No mention of what I had done. No hint of the changes that were even now being filed in offices downtown, documents being stamped and recorded, Alana's name being systematically erased from my legacy. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Alana's face when she threw away the cake, kept hearing her words about competing with a dead woman, kept wondering if I was being cruel or just or both. Around midnight I got up and started baking again. Another cake, same recipe. My hands moved through the familiar motions while my mind spun, questioning everything, questioning nothing, settled into a grim determination that felt both right and terrible. This time I frosted it, using Lydia's cream cheese frosting recipe, the one with the hint of lemon that balanced the sweetness. I wrote "Happy Birthday Daniel" in careful piped letters across the top, the way Lydia always had. It was late, it was pointless. But I needed to prove I could still do this, could still honor my wife's memory even when someone tried to stop me, could still be the father who kept his promises. The legal notification arrived at Daniel and Alana's house, by registered mail, at 11:43 the following morning. According to the tracking information, I obsessively checked on my phone. I knew because I was supposed to be at their house at noon for lunch, the olive branch dinner having been moved to midday for some scheduling reason Alana had texted about. I arrived early, parking my old Volvo in the driveway behind Alana's Mercedes, the car she had insisted they needed, the one with the monthly payment that made Daniel wince. Through the window I could see movement, hear raised voices, and my stomach clenched with something that felt like satisfaction and dread mixed together in equal parts. I stood on the porch, my finger hovering over the doorbell, when the door suddenly swung open. Alana stood there, and her face was a mask of absolute rage, spots of red high on her cheeks, her perfectly styled hair disheveled like she had been running her hands through it. In her hand was a sheaf of papers, the legal letterhead visible even from where I stood. "You." Her voice was barely above a whisper, shaking with fury. "What the hell is this, Harold?" Daniel appeared behind her, his face pale, confused, holding his own copy of the notification. "Dad, what's going on? Alana got this letter and I don't understand." I stepped inside without being invited, closing the door behind me with deliberate calm, channeling every ounce of professional composure I had learned in 40 years of dealing with difficult clients and construction disasters. "It's exactly what it says it is, a revision of my estate documents." Alana's hand was shaking so badly the papers rustled. "You removed me from everything, from the trust, from the property deed, from the inheritance, from all of it. You can't do this." "I already did. The changes were filed yesterday, they're legal and binding." My voice came out colder than I intended, colder than I knew I was capable of, and I saw Daniel flinch. "But why?" Daniel's question was plaintive hurt, and it stabbed at something in my chest that I had been trying to keep armored. "Why would you do this without talking to me first?" Alana cut in before I could answer, her voice rising to something near hysteria. "I'll tell you why. Because your father is a vindictive old man who can't stand that I'm your wife, who can't accept that Lydia is dead and gone, who wants to punish me for not being her. You threw her cake in the trash." The words came out quiet but sharp, each one enunciated with precision. "You told me this wasn't my house anymore. You asked me why you hated you, and you told me it was because Daniel still loves me more than you. You made it very clear, Alana, that you don't want me in this family, so I'm granting your wish. You can have Daniel without competing with me, but you don't get my money, you don't get my property, you don't get the estate that Lydia and I built together." Daniel's face went from confused to horrified. "What, Alana, what is he talking about? What cake?" Alana's eyes darted between us, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to make herself the victim. "It was just a cake, Daniel, an old recipe that wasn't appropriate for your birthday party. I was trying to help, trying to make things nice, and he's turning it into this huge thing. You dumped my mother's birthday cake in the trash and told my father he wasn't welcome in our home." My voice was getting louder now, my control slipping, the rage I had been banking for days starting to leak through the cracks. "You told him he was irrelevant, that you were competing with him for my love. What the hell is wrong with you?" Alana's face crumpled, tears appearing with theatrical timing. "You don't understand what it's like, Daniel. You don't understand how hard I try to make him happy, to live up to Lydia's memory, to be enough for this family. and it's never enough. He judges everything I do, every choice I make, every time I try to make this house ours instead of just his shrine to your mother. That's not fair. Daniel's voice was softer now but strained. My dad has never judged you. He's been nothing but supportive. Supportive? Alana laughed, a bitter sound. He undermines me constantly. He makes you doubt our decisions. He makes me feel like a guest in my own home, like I'm temporary, like I'm just filling a space until he can figure out how to resurrect Lydia and put everything back the way it was. I should have stayed quiet. I should have let Daniel defend me, should have taken the high road, should have been the bigger person. But my pride, my damn stubborn pride that Lydia had warned me about so many times, wouldn't let me. You want to know what's not fair, Alana? Not fair is working your entire life to build something, to create security for your family, to make sure your child is taken care of, and then watching someone who married into that family 2 years ago act like they're entitled to all of it. Not fair is grieving your wife for 43 years and being told you're not allowed to honor her memory in your own house. Not fair is keeping a promise to a dying woman and having it literally thrown in the trash. So yes, I removed you from my estate. Yes, I changed the trust documents and the property deed, and no, I'm not sorry. The room went silent except for Alana's ragged breathing. Daniel stood frozen between us, looking lost, looking younger than his 38 years. Dad, he started and stopped. I don't know what to say. This is so extreme. Is it? I pulled out my phone, fingers trembling as I navigated to my photos. Is it extreme to protect what your mother and I built? Is it extreme to make sure our legacy goes to our blood family and not someone who views us as obstacles? Alana made a sound like a wounded animal. How dare you? How dare you act like I'm some gold digger who married Daniel for money? I love him. I have given him everything. Except respect for his family. The words came out like bullets and I saw them hit. Except space to grieve his mother. Except permission to maintain the traditions that connect him to his past. Daniel finally found his voice, and it was harder than I had ever heard it. Both of you need to stop. This is insane. Dad, you should have talked to me before making changes this drastic. Alana, if you threw away Mom's cake and said those things to Dad, that was cruel and you owe him an apology. But this, he gestured at the papers still clutched in Alana's hand. This feels like retaliation. This feels like you're trying to hurt her because she hurt you. Maybe I am. I met my son's eyes, saw the disappointment there, felt it like a physical weight. Maybe I'm tired of being hurt and just taking it. Maybe I'm done being understanding and patient and grateful that I'm allowed to exist on the edges of my own family. Your mother made me promise to take care of you, Daniel. She made me promise to make sure you were secure. She never made me promise to fund someone who treats me like I'm worthless. Alina's tears were real now, streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. I never said you were worthless. I just want to matter more. I want it to be first for once in my life, to not always be competing with a memory, with a woman I can never measure up to, with a love story I can never match. Do you know what it's like, Harold? Do you know what it's like to love someone who is still in love with someone else? The question hit me hard, unexpected in its honesty, and for a moment I saw past my anger to the pain underneath hers. I saw a young woman who married a man still deep in grief, who moved into a house full of another woman's choices and memories, who was constantly being compared to someone who had been elevated to sainthood by death. And I felt the tiniest crack in my resolve, the smallest whisper of doubt. But then I remembered the cake in the trash. The contempt in her voice, the way she had smiled at Daniel and lied about what happened, and the crack sealed over. Then you should have talked to Daniel about it like an adult. You should have gone to marriage counseling. You should have communicated your insecurity instead of taking it out on a grieving widower who was just trying to honor his wife's memory. You had choices, Alina. You chose cruelty. And you chose revenge. Her voice was empty now, defeated. You chose to hurt me in the most permanent way possible. So congratulations, Harold. You win. I'm removed from your estate. I'm erased from your legacy. I hope it makes you feel better. She turned and walked upstairs, her footsteps heavy on the stairs I had helped Daniel install 5 years ago when they first bought the house from me. Daniel and I stood in the foyer in terrible silence. Finally, he spoke. I need you to leave, Dad. The words felt like being stabbed. Daniel, I said leave. I need to talk to my wife. I just need you to go. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I love you, but what you did was wrong. Not the estate changes necessarily, but doing it without talking to me first. Making me find out like this. Using your money as a weapon. That's not who you taught me to be. Your mother's cake was a weapon too, my voice cracked. Your wife used it to tell me I didn't matter anymore. So you proved her right by showing that money and property matter more than family. Daniel finally looked at me, and his eyes were full of tears. That's not the man who raised me. That's not the man Mom married. I left. What else could I do? I walked back to the guest house, and with every step I questioned everything. Was I right? Was I cruel? Was I both? In my small kitchen, I sat at the table and stared at the cake I had baked last night, the one with Daniel's name piped across the top in careful letters, the one that was supposed to prove something but now just felt sad and pointless. I had won. Alina was removed from my estate, her name scratched out of my will, her claims to my property severed. I had protected what Lydia and I built. I had maintained my boundaries. I had refused to be disrespected. So why did I feel so empty? The hours passed in a blur. I didn't eat, didn't turn on lights as darkness fell. Just sat there thinking about pride and stubbornness and the way they could calcify into something that looked like strength but was really just brittleness. Around 9 that evening, my phone rang. Daniel. I almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail because I couldn't bear to hear more disappointment in his voice. But I was his father. I always answered. "Hello, son." "Dad," he sounded exhausted. "Can you come back to the house? We need to talk, all three of us." "I don't think that's a good idea. Please, it's important." I walked back across the dark yard, following the stone path that felt longer now, weighted with dread. The main house was lit up, every window glowing, and through the kitchen window I could see Daniel and Alina sitting at the table, not touching, the space between them speaking volumes. Daniel let me in. His eyes were red, his face drawn. Alina sat with her hands wrapped around a coffee mug, staring at nothing. I took the chair across from them, feeling like I was on trial, waiting for verdict. Daniel spoke first. "Alina and I have been talking, really talking maybe for the first time in months, about you, about Mom, about us, about everything that's been building." He paused, gathering himself, "and we've decided to separate." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What? No, Daniel, this isn't what I wanted." "Isn't it?" Alina's voice was hollow. "You removed me from your estate. You made it clear I'm not really family. You got what you wanted, Harold. Congratulations." "Alina, stop." Daniel's voice was firm but gentle. "This isn't about Dad's estate changes. This is about us. This is about problems we've been ignoring for 2 years. He looked at me then, and I saw something in his face I couldn't quite read. "Dad, what you did was wrong. The way you did it was wrong. But Alina also did something wrong, something she hasn't told you yet." Alina's hands tightened on her mug. "Daniel, please. No, he deserves to know. He deserves to understand why I'm not fighting him on this." Daniel took a breath. "When Mom died, she left me a letter. You know that. What you don't know is that she left Alina one too. A personal letter, woman to woman, asking her to take care of me, to be patient with my grief, to help me remember Mom in healthy ways, to protect her traditions and her memory, not erase them. Alina never told me about that letter. She threw it away. The words landed like bombs. I stared at Alina, watched her face crumble, watched guilt and shame wash over her features. "Why?" My voice was barely a whisper. "Why would you do that?" "Because I was jealous." The confession came out broken. "Because even dead, she was more important than me." Because I couldn't stand one more thing telling me to honor Lydia, to remember Lydia, to keep Lydia alive when all I wanted was for her to finally be gone so I could have Daniel to myself. She was sobbing now, real ugly crying, nothing performed about it. I know it was terrible. I know it was unforgivable. But I was drowning, Harold. I was drowning in her memory, in her perfection, in the way everyone talked about her like she was a saint, and I was just the poor replacement who could never measure up. Daniel continued, his voice steady despite the tears on his face. "I found the letter last week. Alina had kept it, hidden in a box in the basement. I don't know if she couldn't quite throw it away or if she forgot about it, but I found it. And reading Mom's words, reading how kind she was to Alina, how much she tried to help her, how she asked Alina to be part of our family and to honor our traditions, and then seeing how Alina responded to that kindness." He trailed off. "It made me realize we have bigger problems than I wanted to admit. I felt like I was underwater, everything muffled and strange. The cake was the breaking point," Daniel agreed, "but it wasn't the beginning. Alina has been pushing you out for months, Dad. Small things I didn't want to see. Comments about how you should move farther away. Suggestions that we spend holidays separately. Always finding reasons you couldn't come to dinner or events. I told myself she was just stressed, just adjusting, just trying to make the house feel like ours. But after I found Mom's letter, after I realized she had actively rejected Mom's kindness and her dying wishes, I had to admit the truth. Alina doesn't want to be part of our family. She wants me separated from our family." Alina didn't defend herself. She just sat there crying, shaking her head slowly. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to explain it in a way that makes sense. I love Daniel so much it makes me crazy. And that love got twisted into something ugly, something possessive, something that made me see his family as enemies instead of gifts. I need help. I need therapy. I need to figure out why I can't share love, why I turn everything into competition." She looked at me finally, her face destroyed by tears and guilt. "And I'm sorry about the cake, Harold. I'm sorry I threw away something that meant so much to you. I'm sorry I was cruel. I'm sorry I wasted the chance to know you and to learn from you and to be part of something beautiful. I'm sorry I let my insecurity turn me into someone I don't recognize." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to forgive her, wanted to be gracious, wanted to take the high road Lydia would have taken. But the larger part, the stubborn, prideful part, couldn't quite get there. "Not yet, maybe not ever. I accept your apology, but I'm not reversing the estate changes." The words came out hard, final. "You've shown me who you are, Alina. You've shown me that when things get difficult, you choose cruelty and deception. I can't trust you with my legacy. I can't trust you to honor what Lydia and I built." Daniel nodded slowly, like he expected this. I understand, and honestly, Dad, I think you're right. Not because Alina doesn't deserve forgiveness eventually, but because trust has to be rebuilt over years, not days, and she and I have our own work to do. He reached across the table and took Alina's hand, and I saw love there still, complicated and damaged but real. We're going to separate for a while. Alina is going to stay with her sister in Portland. We're both going to do individual therapy and eventually couples counseling if we decide to try to make this work. But we need space. We need to figure out who we are apart before we can figure out if we work together. Alina squeezed his hand. I love you enough to let you have space to decide if I'm worth fighting for. And Harold, she looked at me with swollen eyes. I don't blame you for protecting your estate. I don't blame you for not trusting me. I hope someday I can earn back a place in this family, but I understand if that never happens. I'm just sorry I wasted the chance I had. She stood up and Daniel stood with her. I'm going upstairs to pack. I'm leaving tonight. I can't stay in this house another day knowing what I've done, knowing how I've failed. She paused at the doorway. There's something else you should know, both of you. Her voice got very quiet. Daniel has a son, from before we met. His name is Lydia, actually. Lydia Jr. after his grandmother. The mother couldn't keep him, some complicated situation, and Daniel has been supporting them financially for years, but she didn't want him involved. Last week she contacted Daniel and said she's sick, really sick, and she wants Lydia Jr. to know his father before she dies. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the table. What? Daniel's face was a mixture of shame and hope and terror. I was going to tell you, Dad, I've been trying to figure out how. His name is Lydia, he's 5 years old, and he's flying here next week. His mother has stage 4 cancer and no other family. She wants me to take him to raise him. And I said yes. I said yes without really asking Alina because I knew what she would say, and that was another problem between us, the fact that I couldn't trust her to accept my son. He was crying now too, everyone at the table drowning in tears and truth. You have a grandson, Dad, named after Mom, who she never got to meet, and I kept him secret because I was ashamed of the timing, ashamed of the circumstances, ashamed that I got someone pregnant during a bad period before Alina and I got serious. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process. A grandson named Lydia, 5 years old, coming here, needing a family. When, the word came out strangled. When do I meet him? Next Monday. He's flying in with his mother. She wants to meet us, wants to see where he'll live, wants to make sure he'll be loved before she dies. Daniel's voice broke on the last word. She's giving me the greatest gift imaginable, Dad. She's giving me my son. And I'm terrified I'll fail him the way I failed at protecting you from Alina, the way I failed at seeing what was happening in my own house. Alina spoke from the doorway, her voice thick with tears. I couldn't accept him, that's the truth. Daniel wanted to bring him here last year when his mother first got sick, and I said no. I said we weren't ready, we didn't have room, it was too complicated. But the real reason was I couldn't stand the idea of raising a child who would be another connection to Daniel's past, another person who would love him in ways I couldn't control. And that makes me a terrible person. That makes me someone who doesn't deserve to be a mother, so I'm leaving. I'm leaving so Daniel can have space to be a father, so Lydia Jr. can have a home without my poison in it, so maybe someday I can figure out how to be better. She disappeared upstairs, and I heard her moving around pulling suitcases, the sounds of a life being hastily packed. Daniel and I sat in silence. Finally, I spoke. Why did you name him after your mother? Because she was the best person I ever knew. Because I wanted him to have that legacy. Because even though I messed up the timing and the circumstances, I wanted him to be connected to something good and pure. Daniel wiped his face. Mom would have loved him, Dad. She would have been the most amazing grandmother. She would have. I felt my own tears finally coming. 2 years of grief I had been holding back with birthday cakes and stubbornness, and pride finally breaking through. She would have spoiled him rotten and taught him all her secrets, and loved him completely. I need you, Dad. Daniel's voice was small, vulnerable in a way I hadn't heard since he was a child. I need you to help me raise him. I need you to teach him about Mom, to tell him her stories, to bake him her birthday cake every year. I need you to be the grandfather she never got to be the grandmother. Can you do that? Even after everything that just happened, even after all this mess, can you still be here for us? I reached across the table and took my son's hand, felt how much he was shaking, felt the fear and hope radiating off him. Of course I can, of course I will. That's what family does, Daniel, that's what love means. Not estate documents and property deeds and hurt feelings. This, showing up, being present, keeping promises. I paused, feeling something shift in my chest, something hard and cold beginning to thaw. Your mother made me promise to take care of you. She made me promise to keep her traditions alive. She made me promise to be there for her grandchildren, even though we didn't know then that they would exist. And I will keep that promise, son. I will keep all of them. We sat there holding hands while upstairs Alina packed, while the house that had seen so much conflict began to feel like it might survive after all, while the future rearranged itself into something completely unexpected. A grandson, 5 years old, named Lydia. Flying here in 1 week, needing a family, needing love, needing birthday cakes and traditions, and a grandfather who knew how to show up even when it was hard. Elena came downstairs an hour later with 2 suitcases and a face that looked older somehow, worn down by truth and consequences. She paused in the doorway. Take care of each other, take care of Lydia, and Daniel, thank you for loving me enough to let me go figure out how to be better. Daniel walked her to her car, and I watched from the window as they stood in the driveway talking, watched him hug her, watched her drive away into the night. He came back inside, his face was devastated but also relieved, like someone who had been holding their breath for years and finally remembered how to exhale. I'm scared, Dad, I know. What if I'm a terrible father? What if I can't do this? You won't be terrible. You'll be scared and imperfect and you'll make mistakes, but you'll also be there. You'll show up. You'll love him. That's what matters. I stood up, my knees aching, my back sore, feeling every one of my 72 years. Come with me. I led Daniel across the dark yard to the guest house, into my small kitchen, and opened the refrigerator. Inside sat the cake I had baked last night, the one with his name piped across the top in careful letters. I made this for you, your real birthday cake, your mother's recipe. I didn't frost it perfectly and the letters are a little crooked, but it's made with love and memory and 43 years of watching your mother's hands move through this same recipe. Daniel stared at the cake and his face crumpled. You kept making them, even after Elena threw the first one away. I promised your mother, and I never break my promises to her. I pulled the cake out, set it on the counter, found 2 forks. No plates, no ceremony, just us. The way it used to be when you were little and we'd sneak pieces of cake before she finished frosting it. We stood at the counter eating cake with forks straight from the plate, and it tasted like cinnamon and orange and grief and love all mixed together. It's perfect, Dad. It tastes exactly like I remember. Your mother would be proud of you, I said quietly. Proud that you're bringing your son home. Proud that you're trying to do the right thing even when it's terrifying. Proud that you chose love over convenience. And you, Daniel's voice was hesitant. Are you proud of me? Even though my marriage is falling apart, even though I kept secrets, even though I let Elena hurt you, I'm proud of you because you're human, because you make mistakes and own them, because you're willing to be scared and do the hard thing anyway. I set down my fork, and I'm sorry too. Sorry I let my pride make me vindictive. Sorry I changed the estate documents without talking to you first. Sorry I made everything harder. You were protecting yourself, Daniel said. You were hurt and you reacted. I understand that, but Dad, can you promise me something? Anything. Promise me you'll try to forgive Elena someday. Not now, not soon, but someday. Because she's sick in a way she needs to heal from, and holding on to anger will only hurt you. He paused. Mom wouldn't want you to spend your last years bitter. She'd want you to be open to possibility, even the possibility that Elena might change and grow and become someone worthy of being in this family again. I thought about Lydia's letter to Elena, about the kindness and grace my wife had tried to extend even from beyond the grave, about how disappointed she would be in my cold calculation and my permanent dismissals. I'll try. That's all I can promise. I'll try. We finished the cake standing in that small kitchen, father and son, both of us damaged and imperfect and doing our best. And when Daniel finally left to go back to the big house that now felt emptier without Elena's hostile presence, I stood at the window and watched him walk across the dark yard, watched the light come on in the master bedroom, watched my son face a future that was completely different than he planned. I thought about revenge and how hollow it tasted even when you won. I thought about pride and stubbornness and how they could protect you but also isolate you. I thought about Lydia and how much I missed her wisdom, her ability to see past anger to the hurt underneath, her grace in the face of conflict. Monday arrived faster than seemed possible, time compressing in that strange way it does when you're terrified and hopeful in equal measure. Daniel and I drove to the airport together, neither of us talking much, both lost in our own thoughts about the 5-year-old boy who was about to change everything. We waited at the arrival gate, Daniel packing, me sitting because my legs felt shaky, and then they appeared. A thin woman in a wheelchair pushed by an airport attendant, and next to her, holding her hand, a small boy with Daniel's eyes and Lydia's smile, wearing a dinosaur t-shirt and looking scared and brave at the same time. Daddy, the word came out uncertain, testing, and I watched my son's face transform with love and terror and wonder. Yeah, buddy, I'm your daddy. I'm so glad you're here. Daniel knelt down, and the boy Lydia, my grandson, my wife's namesake, stepped forward tentatively and let himself be hugged. The woman in the wheelchair smiled, and even ravaged by disease I could see she had once been beautiful. Thank you for coming, she said quietly to Daniel. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for giving him a family. She looked at me then. You must be Harold, Daniel's father, Lydia's husband. I am. My voice came out rough with emotion. And you've given us the most precious gift imaginable. Thank you. We talked for a few minutes there in the airport, making plans for the next few days, discussing logistics and paperwork, and all the painful practical details of transferring custody of a child from a dying mother to a father he barely knew. Young Lydia stood close to his mother, holding her hand, looking at us with eyes that had seen too much sadness for 5 years. When it was time to go, when Daniel loaded the small suitcase into the car and helped Lydia into the car seat we had installed that morning, I watched the boy look back at his mother being wheeled away. Is she coming too? Not today, buddy. Daniel's voice was gentle. Your mom needs to stay at the hospital for a while, but we'll visit her every day, I promise. Okay. The word was so small, so trusting, and it broke something in me. We drove home in careful silence, the kind of quiet that comes when everyone is being gentle with everyone else's fragility. At the house, Daniel showed Lydia his new room, the one we had spent the weekend preparing, painting the walls blue, putting up dinosaur posters, making it feel like a space for a little boy to grow up in. I had snuck in that morning and left something on the nightstand. A framed photo of Lydia, the grandmother, smiling in her garden, holding tomatoes, looking vibrant and alive and happy. Next to it, I had placed a small card that read, "Your grandmother loved you before she met you, and she would have been so proud to know you." That night, after dinner and bedtime stories and all the strange new rituals of having a child in the house, Daniel came to find me in the guest house. Thank you, Dad, for the picture, for everything, for showing up today even though I know this is all overwhelming. How is he? Scared, sad, but also curious and brave. He asked me why he has a girl's name. Daniel smiled despite the tears in his eyes. I told him he's named after the strongest, kindest, most magical person who ever lived, and that his name is a superpower that will remind him he comes from love. That's beautiful, son. I learned from the best. He hugged me, and I held my boy and thought about how family was so much messier and more complicated and more painful than anyone ever prepared you for, but also more essential, more precious, more worth fighting for. Over the next weeks, we found our rhythm. Lydia's mother passed away peacefully with Daniel and her son at her bedside, and we all cried together at the small memorial service. Young Lydia moved through grief in that elastic way children do, sad one moment and playing dinosaurs the next, and slowly the scared look in his eyes began to fade, replaced by something that looked like security, like belonging. I baked cakes, taught Lydia the recipe, let him stand on a stool and help me measure and mix and fold. Told him stories about his grandmother while we waited for cakes to bake, watched him absorb them like treasures. Alina stayed in Portland in therapy, working on herself. She sent cards to Lydia occasionally, careful and appropriate, asking about him without demanding anything. Daniel talked to her sometimes, long conversations I wasn't privy to, navigating the impossible question of whether their marriage could be saved or if they were better apart. 6 months after the night Alina threw away the cake, 6 months after I removed her from my estate in cold fury, 6 months after everything fell apart and rearranged itself into something completely different, I did something I hadn't expected to do. I called my lawyer Robert Bradford. I want to add someone to my estate documents. He sounded surprised. I thought you were firm on the changes we made. I am, but I want to create a trust for Lydia, my grandson. Something that will be his when he turns 25, something that will give him security and options and freedom. And I want to designate Daniel as the trustee, but also, I took a breath. Also Alina, if she and Daniel reconcile and if she demonstrates consistent mental health treatment and genuine change over the next 2 years. That's very specific, Robert said carefully, and very generous considering what happened. Lydia would want me to be open to possibility. To forgiveness, to the idea that people can grow and change. I'm not good at it. It goes against every instinct I have, but I'm trying to be better. For my grandson, for my son, for my wife who loved Grace even when it was hard. The paperwork took weeks. I made Robert build in protections and contingencies and requirements for Alina's inclusion. But I also made space for possibility, for the chance that she might actually do the work and become someone who could be trusted again, someone who could be part of this strange, complicated family we were building from broken pieces. One evening, while Lydia and I were baking his 9th cake with me, and he was getting good at the whisking technique, he asked me a question. Grandpa, did you love my other grandma very, very much, more than anything in the world? Do you still love her even though she died? I knelt down so we were eye level, looking at this child with my wife's name and my wife's smile. I will love her every single day for the rest of my life. Love doesn't end just because someone is gone. It just changes shape. It becomes memory and tradition and the way we honor them by living well and loving others. Like making cakes, exactly like making cakes. He thought about this, his small face serious. I think she would be happy I'm here. I think she would be happy you teach me to make cakes. She would be thrilled beyond measure. She would be so proud of you. Even though I have her name and I'm a boy. Especially because you have her name, it means you carry her forward. It means she's still here in a way, still part of our story, still making the world better through you. He seemed satisfied with this and went back to stirring, his tongue poking out in concentration the way Daniel used to do when he was small, the way Lydia used to do when she was working on something that mattered. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of him at the counter, flour on his nose, surrounded by mixing bowls and measuring cups, the late afternoon light streaming through the window turning everything golden. And I sent it to Alina with a simple message. He's thriving. We're all healing. Maybe someday you will too. She responded hours later. Thank you for this. Thank you for not giving up on the possibility of me. I'm working hard to become someone worthy of being in his life, in Daniel's life, in your life. I don't know if I'll get there, but I'm trying. That's all I could ask. Because the truth is, revenge had felt good in the moment, felt justified and righteous and clean. But living past it, living into the messy, complicated reality of actual human beings with actual struggles and actual capacity for change, that was harder and more real and ultimately more aligned with the person Lydia had loved for 43 years. I wasn't perfect. I was still stubborn and prideful and prone to cutting people off when they hurt me, but I was trying to be better, trying to make space for grace even when it felt unnatural. Trying to honor my wife not just by baking her cakes, but by living with her kind of love, the kind that believed in second chances and human complexity and the possibility of transformation. 3 months later, Elena came back. Not to move in, not to resume her marriage immediately, but to meet Lydia Jr., to start the slow, careful work of building trust, to show Daniel and me through consistent action that she was different now, that therapy was working, that she understood what she had done and why it was wrong. The first time she saw Lydia, she cried. He's beautiful. He looks so much like Daniel, so much like the photos of his grandmother. He is beautiful, I agreed, and he's had quite a year. I'm sorry I wasn't here for it. I'm sorry I made myself into someone who couldn't be here for it. She looked at me with clear eyes. I know you removed me from your estate. Daniel told me, and I want you to know I understand why. I would have done the same thing. But I hope someday, maybe not soon, but someday, I might earn back a place in this family. Not because of money or inheritance or property, but because I've proven I can be someone who adds to this family instead of subtracting from it. That's what I hope too, I said honestly. For Daniel's sake, for Lydia's sake, and yes, for yours too, because everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment. We watched through the window as Daniel and Lydia played in the yard, father and son learning each other, building something new from nothing, creating family through choice and time and showing up. Elena's voice was quiet. I'll never forget the cake I threw away. I'll never stop being ashamed of that moment. But I promise you, Harold, if I ever earn my way back into this family, I will learn that recipe. I will help Lydia make it. I will honor your wife's memory instead of resenting it. Because I understand now that memory isn't my enemy. It's a gift, a guide, a reminder of what real love looks like. That would mean more than you know, I said, and I meant it. A year after the night everything fell apart, Daniel's birthday arrived again. This time, 3 of us baked the cake together. Me, Daniel, and young Lydia, all crowded into my small guest house kitchen, measuring and mixing and folding while stories about grandmother Lydia flowed like water, filling the space with her presence, her wisdom, her love. Elena watched from the doorway, not yet trusted enough to help but present enough to witness, learning the recipe by observation, taking notes in a small notebook, working her way back into our lives one careful step at a time. We sang happy birthday to Daniel surrounded by cake and laughter, and the kind of messy imperfect love that is the only kind that's real. And later, much later, after Lydia was in bed and Daniel had gone back to the main house and Elena had driven back to the apartment where she was slowly rebuilding her life, I sat in my study with a cup of tea and the leather folder that had started everything. Inside were the revised estate documents, the ones that had removed Elena's name with such cold precision, the ones that had been my revenge, my protection, my pride made manifest in legal language. I pulled out a pen and made a note for my next meeting with Robert. Add contingency clause for Elena's reinstatement pending 2 years of demonstrated change and family counseling completion. Then I opened my laptop and began writing. Not legal documents this time, but something else. A letter to Lydia, to my wife, to the woman whose cake had started this whole impossible journey. I wrote about our grandson who carried her name and her smile, about our son who was learning to be a father despite his fear, about Elena who was learning to be better despite her demons, about me who was learning that revenge was easy and grace was hard, but grace was the only thing that actually healed. I wrote about the cakes we kept baking, the traditions we kept honoring, the way love persisted even through death and conflict and profound human messiness. And I wrote about the unexpected ending to my attempt at revenge, how the thing I did to hurt someone ended up being the thing that saved my family, that brought us together, that gave us space to fall apart and rebuild into something more honest and real. I wrote until my hands cramped and my eyes grew heavy and the first light of dawn began creeping through the window. Then I saved the document with a simple title, The Last Birthday Cake, because it wasn't really about revenge at all. It was about a man trying to keep a promise to his dying wife, about a family breaking and healing in the same breath, about the way traditions matter not because they're perfect, but because they connect us across time and loss to something essential. About how love, real love, survives everything if you're brave enough to keep baking the cakes.